there are references. If somebody didn't have a problem with the elements, but didn't understand representation, and couldn't find their way home here, so to speak, then they would go to alternative styles of representation. Again, everything's situationally relevant. There's no choices that aren't real. And the choices respond to the articulation of needs in the learner. One other thing, I want to disclaim any final value for the geometrical layout of the interface or any of the specific little pieces of art that act as buttons or switches. These are all placeholders for the dialogue process itself, and we'll tune them in. For kindergartners, for example, these buttons will look radically different than they would for 8th graders. And the buttons and icons would adjust themselves to different themes and subject matter. So in science, there may be a different set of representation lenses than there would be for poetry. Okay? It's a process of relating to meaning if you have this quality in the lab. Then there's a process of nonlinear navigation, not just going step, like you're turning the page, but jumping outside of the bounds of the moment. So these two icons, this one means, for example, travel into meaning, travel more into the core meaning. This means travel away from the spot we're in now. Then there's the compass setting. A collector's case, which I'll show you. And the idea of the collector case is rather simple, that as learners moving through all of this, that got 6 different highlighters, different colored highlighters, representing different categories of collection activities that might be relevant. At another level of discussion, we could also say that these different colors can also be, you can adjust them so it's pink to Henry, right? And wash out something, highlight something in something somebody's reading, and by switching it to Henry, send that to my collaboration partner, Henry. That fast, okay? Or instead of using the highlighter, just use Henry and pull up a window that while I'm right here in this subject, I can draw Henry's attention to it and it'll come right back to the spot. So that's what the collector case is about. And let me give you some more specific examples of how this works. In the case of, this is other help. This would be things that the system didn't carry in its normal structure. And this is more traditional hypertext kind of activity. So for example, when I do this, it goes through and shows me where some of the hot buttons are. Now, I don't like to do this. Because I don't want the learner to know where we can, where we can. I kind of want it to be as if at any given time, whatever the learner might look at, might ask a question about, is going to be supported. The idea is that the learner doesn't feel subconsciously almost that following through with their meaning needs is going to cause a response in their, like the old system, learning that those meanings are relevant. They're circumstantially unresponded to, no use getting in touch with them. So that was the reference mode. This is the representation mode. Excuse me. This is the representation mode. So for example, you see the key points. Wait a minute. With respect to this thing about rainbows, I would like to see a story. Different pathways. So references, different pathways or lenses. These are the 2 different slide rates on our learner scope, you might say. This is jump to a table of contents, my gross past travels, an index, or to a library to load something new. Now, in addition to this, which is the structural content-oriented approach to navigation, the system has something else that we really, really like, we're really happy with, and that all of the gurus of interface we've encountered have also really appreciated. And that's what we call personal travel, personal reference travel, personal representation travel. So for example, notice the icon here says that this is the encyclopedia on rainbow. If I click on this, These are the different references we've looked at. So, geez, there was something back about Newton that I remember as being important. Okay, now I'm done. If I can jump back in my own personal reference travel, without having to use the system to go back and refocus on the spot it was linked to or connected to. Anywhere I've gone, I've got an audit trail that I can use to real quickly jump back to that place. Now, the same is true representationally. Those are the different representations we did. Remember the simulator on gravity where we looked at the moons flying around? In short, the Once Upon a Time story about Darren, the key points of the rainbow we just looked at. So that is nonlinear navigation systemically and personal past travels and representations of reference. If you went into the different lenses, what I saw before, gee, there was a thing I saw before, I know if I can just go back and look at it real quick, I can go on. Now, this hasn't been Nintendoized. This doesn't work for 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds quite yet. But this process ultimately will. I asked you to think for a moment about the trim tab on an airplane. Everybody fly within an airplane with a little trim tab to kind of adjust for keeping it balanced and flying along. These tabs allow the learner to articulate what their mediation preferences are, not their moment-to-moment meaning preferences are. So, for example, generally, they don't like text that much. They would prefer something that's got more image intensity. They like to have, they're more audible learners. They prefer a certain degree of interaction. The tone representationally should be more inductive or deductive or conductive. That the density, that they don't like it very loud, but they prefer it to be concise, and that they want it to be pretty broad in contextual scope. Now what that does is our whole engine is designed to work on an attribute level rather than an object level. Is that as these choices, as these materials start to flow into, as resources to this relevancy bubble I mentioned earlier, and as the learner has these choices, what we're able to do is to kind of provide a priority listing of these different choices according to not only their meaning needs right now, but their mediation preferences. Now, some of you that have spent any time with the authoring process are already asking, well, how do you phrase the material for all this? I hope to get to that, and we'll get to parts of it before we're through. But the most important part of this whole process for the moment is to understand the potential value of what we're trying to propose and do from a learner's point of view. And if we get that, I assure you that we'll get to a point where we can understand that the authoring paradigm that feeds this is ultimately how the learners use this. The collector case, I mentioned the collector case. Notice it has 6 different cavities. Actually, before I go on to this, because a couple of you have to leave early, in particular that you do, I'd like to show you one other thing. Remember I mentioned as we started the importance of what I call the mutually learning-oriented relations. The fact that whatever a learner does provides information that the system learns how to better optimize its relationships to learners through. Every time the learner's been doing all of these things, asking for references, spinning those lenses, if you will, the system's been keeping track of everything. Without the learner having to worry about it. Just flow off the backside, water off the backside. So for example, these references we looked at. Make sure the radar helps. Darren, I first pulled that. The Einstein sound, the picture of Einstein, the biography about Einstein, encyclopedia on Einstein, author's note on Newton, biography on Newton, biography on Galileo, picture of Galileo, and we looked at an encyclopedia of rainbow.